Despite my social awkwardness and having struggled academically in elementary school due to the neighborhood I grew up in, I managed to excel in relationships during my college years. I lived in a middle-class suburb of Boston, an area filled with intelligent, ambitious women my age. I attended Massachusetts Institute of Technology, just a 10-minute drive from my parents' home, which allowed me to save on housing costs while pursuing my computer science degree. During those university years, I developed a unique reputation. I helped many young women with their studies, assisting with homework, taking notes, and tutoring various subjects in high school and community college. In return, these women offered me companionship and valuable social experiences. This mutually beneficial arrangement led to satisfying relationships with several women between the ages of 18 and 21. They recommended me to their friends, describing me as patient, reserved, and intelligent. I found common ground with them intellectually, which made our interactions comfortable and meaningful. In intimate moments, I always treated these women with respect and discretion, never discussing our private encounters with others, though I suspect they may have shared details among themselves. During this period, I had relationships with 11 women, many of whom I saw multiple times. These were purely transactional connections, an exchange that served my interests while helping them academically. Only one woman, who went by the nickname Ruby, not her real name, stood out from the rest. Despite my usual attentiveness with others, our dynamic was different. Ruby was my age, tall and athletic with a striking figure, not overweight but muscular, particularly in her thighs and upper body. While her face was ordinary, those who knew her agreed she had an extraordinary physique. She was confident, seductive, and participated in several softball and basketball leagues. Ruby wasn't academically inclined but was far from unintelligent. She had greater aspirations than many in our community. Her goal was to create her own fitness training platform. I tutored her in mathematics and business planning to help her achieve this goal. She trusted me completely, something she admitted she rarely did with others. Despite my sometimes awkward approach, she always expressed satisfaction with our time together. She was the only woman who didn't request academic help before our intimate encounters. I clearly remember those 6 occasions. They left a lasting impression on my socially awkward self. One evening she called unexpectedly, inviting me over. I went immediately, and she welcomed me warmly. Although I never developed romantic feelings for Ruby, she became important to me, and I would have done anything for her without expecting anything in return. In my senior year at MIT, I developed an innovative biometric authentication system, similar to but more sophisticated than the RFID technology used in electronic toll collection systems. My invention was specifically designed for high-security environments. Various versions of my sensors were adopted by corporations, government agencies at both state and federal levels, and even military installations. To patent my inventions, I needed security clearance. The royalties from these patents generated significant profits, allowing me to establish 2 technology companies to market my products and develop new ones. Lacking managerial skills and preferring to focus on innovation and design, I instructed my attorneys to create various holding companies to manage my business interests while I maintained ownership of the main holding company. Understanding the full extent of my corporate structure would require considerable time and expertise. I never used this complex network to evade taxes. Some entities were strategically placed offshore simply to protect my assets. Only the CEOs and financial directors of my 2 operating companies knew about my ultimate control. To everyone else, I was merely the head of product development at one of the operating companies. By age 24, I had established my career foundation and felt ready for a more meaningful relationship, but my social anxiety made this challenging. I no longer needed to use my intelligence as a means of attracting partners. Despite these obstacles, I persistently tried dating through various online platforms and social gatherings. Finally, at 26, I met Melissa. She was undoubtedly the most attractive woman who had ever reciprocated my romantic feelings. Not only did she have a beautiful face, but she also possessed an amazing figure. Looking back at our rather conventional courtship, I realized it was more superficial than I initially thought. I was so captivated by her appearance that I overlooked certain qualities typically valued in a partner. One thing that struck me was Melissa's complete disinterest in my work. She never showed curiosity or asked questions about it, seeming not to understand whenever I mentioned my job. Surprisingly, this lack of interest became advantageous when discussing our prenuptial agreement. Sarah, my trusted attorney who had helped establish my companies, strongly recommended that I sign a prenuptial agreement despite my hesitation. She made it clear she would no longer work with me if I didn't present the document to Melissa before our wedding. Sarah drafted a straightforward prenuptial agreement that excluded from common ownership any shares, interests, or royalties related to companies or patents owned by either party in amounts exceeding 10% at the time of marriage or acquired during the marriage. Melissa asked her father to review the document, after which she signed it without objection. The intimate relationship between Melissa and me was always satisfying. After 2.5 years of marriage, we were expecting our first child. During an impromptu visit to my parents, I unexpectedly ran into Ruby on the street. We decided to meet for coffee, and I was pleasantly surprised to see she looked as vibrant as ever. She spoke enthusiastically about her latest fitness platform concept, and I couldn't help admiring her confidence and style. My parents had refused my offers to buy them a new house in a more upscale neighborhood, preferring to remain in their friendly community surrounded by longtime friends. Meeting Ruby and catching up over coffee made my brief visit even more memorable. She shared that she was developing a comprehensive fitness training platform, but had encountered financial difficulties. When I delicately inquired about her situation, I learned she needed just $25,000 to successfully launch the site. I promised to meet her again at the coffee shop in a week, mentioning that I might introduce her to a potential investor. Ruby was thrilled at the prospect, hugging me warmly and kissing me on the cheek as I left. I contemplated this for a week. $25,000 seemed insignificant to me, and although her business venture was unconventional, I genuinely liked her. A week later, we met again, and she looked even more striking than before, dressed professionally, but emphasizing her athletic figure, which I remembered well from my student years. As soon as our coffee arrived, I handed her an envelope containing $25,000 in cash. Ruby was stunned, tears streaming down her face, a reaction I'd never seen from her given her typically composed demeanor. She offered me ownership in her platform, but I refused, insisting the money was a gift without conditions. She made a tempting offer, promising intimate companionship, and I believe with her determination and physique, she would have fulfilled that promise. However, I respectfully declined, expressing my love for my wife. When we said goodbye, Ruby, with tears in her eyes, remarked, "Your wife is very lucky," but offered her help if I ever needed it. I simply replied, "Just be successful." Although I felt momentarily awkward during our farewell hug, Ruby graciously didn't mention it. Melissa and I eventually had 3 children, a daughter Emma, another daughter Whitney, and finally a son, Jerry. While I didn't name Whitney after Ruby, I happily agreed when my wife suggested the name. Though my intimate relationship with Melissa remained satisfying, I gradually noticed her superficiality and materialistic tendencies. Despite this, I appreciated her other positive qualities and the fact that she was the only woman I had ever truly loved. Most importantly, she gave me 3 wonderful children. Emma, now 12, possessed her mother's beauty and the best qualities of both Melissa and myself. She had intelligence comparable to mine, achieving the same level of genius in standardized tests while surpassing me in social skills. At age 10, Whitney also displayed striking features, though she inherited some of my less remarkable physical traits. Nevertheless, she was distinguished by kindness, compassion, and empathy, the most caring person I had ever known. She had a radiant presence that could brighten any room. Jerry, our youngest, was an energetic and cheerful boy who clearly inherited his athletic ability from Melissa. I made efforts to learn about baseball and basketball so we could have meaningful conversations about his favorite sports. Despite his athleticism, Jerry was always kind-hearted, never spoke ill of others, and maintained a consistently positive attitude. He had strong relationships with his sisters, and they all got along harmoniously. Despite having wonderful children, one might assume I considered Melissa an excellent mother, but that wasn't the case. Our primary disagreements stemmed from our differing parenting approaches. I couldn't identify the exact reason, perhaps jealousy, but Melissa's relationship with Emma was strained. She was excessively strict, and her comments were sometimes harsh. I repeatedly observed Melissa mistreating Emma, reaching a breaking point by the time our daughter turned 12. It became evident that Emma would only accompany her mother anywhere if I was present. This became problematic one summer when Melissa wanted to take the children to our lake house for a week while I had to work. It required all my persuasive abilities to convince Emma to join the trip, and I had a serious conversation with Melissa to ensure she would treat Emma kindly during the vacation. Although Melissa had better relationships with Whitney and Jerry, she still had difficult moments with them. Despite being a stay-at-home mother, I spent as much time with the children as she did. She was always attending various classes, so my time with them was often more meaningful. Having been married for about 15 years with 3 wonderful children and a wife I deeply cared for, I was driving home from the airport after a one-night business trip. It was approximately 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Although I had informed Melissa of my entire itinerary and called the family the previous night, she seemed disinterested in our conversation, and I wasn't certain she would be home when I arrived. I was looking forward to spending intimate time with her before the children returned from school at 3:30 p.m. When I stopped at the intersection to turn onto our street, I noticed a familiar car passing by, a silver Tesla driven by Daniel Reed. He was one of the top salespeople in my company, specializing in government contracts. Though not an engineer, he understood our technologies well and possessed a natural charm that allowed him to excel in his role. Like all our employees, he had high-level security clearance, even higher than most due to the sensitive nature of the government applications of our products. I wondered why Daniel would be in this part of town at this hour. Naively, I thought he might have some legitimate reason to be in the neighborhood. A few minutes later, I arrived at my front door and entered the house. The next thing I remember was waking up in a hospital bed. As soon as I opened my eyes, a nurse rushed into the room, followed shortly by a doctor. "How are you feeling, Mr. Chun?" asked the kind nurse named Nancy. "It feels like my head is being squeezed," I moaned. "We're very glad you woke up so quickly," she exclaimed, checking my vitals on a nearby monitor. "Why am I in the hospital, and how did I get here?" I asked as the doctor entered the room. "Hello, Mr. Chun. I'm Dr. Patel." A female doctor greeted me warmly. "Let me examine your eyes before answering your questions," she said as Nurse Nancy took my wrist. Dr. Patel took a pen light from her pocket and carefully examined my eyes, gently manipulating the eyelids and surrounding tissue. After a thorough examination, Dr. Patel straightened up and Nurse Nancy released my wrist. They both smiled as Dr. Patel informed me that I had a concussion. "According to your wife, you tripped in the bedroom, fell backward onto the marble floor in the hallway, and hit your head. Although the situation could have been fatal, your vital signs are normal, and the concussion is likely not as serious as initially feared." At the recollection of what actually caused my fall, a wave of sadness swept over me. My eyes widened, and I let out a loud groan, feeling nauseated. Fortunately, Nurse Nancy acted quickly and managed to place a container under my chin just in time. Though it was an unconventional emesis basin, the contents of my stomach, mostly bile since I hadn't eaten lunch, went into it. Having completely emptied my stomach, I leaned back, and Nancy applied a cold compress to my forehead. Dr. Patel performed another examination and expressed surprise at my vomiting, suggesting it might indicate a more severe concussion than initially assessed. Perhaps my immediate reaction was triggered by the memory of the emotional shock that led to my fall. I asked, fully understanding the likely answer. "Yes, that's a plausible explanation," Dr. Patel said, thoughtfully. "Have you experienced a similar crisis before?" "Yes," I replied abruptly. "I didn't handle my emotions well when I realized my wife had cheated on me," I added with a snort. After a brief pause, I felt proud that I had refrained from using profanity in my outburst, though I remained concerned. My doctors appeared shocked, but I couldn't resist adding a touch of sarcasm when I inquired about my wife. Nancy explained that Melissa had gone to pick up our children from school. Checking my watch, I realized it was 3:28 p.m., so she was likely collecting them at that moment. Dr. Patel then asked about my recent food intake. "Have you eaten anything recently?" she asked, looking at me with concern. "No, not since about 8 o'clock this morning," I replied. "Since your vomiting seems to be emotionally induced rather than concussion-related, I strongly recommend that you eat something, especially before your wife returns with the children." I hesitated. "Do you think I'll vomit again when I see her?" Dr. Patel reassured me. "No, I don't think so." Then she instructed Nurse Nancy, "Please ask the kitchen to bring a bowl of oatmeal immediately." "I'd like oatmeal with cinnamon and raisins, without brown sugar," I said to Nancy with a smile. The oatmeal arrived 5 minutes later. I ate quickly and was beginning to feel somewhat better when Nancy returned to my room and announced that I had visitors. My 3 beloved children rushed in, each trying to reach me first. I laughed and warned them not to touch my head or neck. Attempting to hug all 3 simultaneously, I listened to them chattering away. I couldn't help but chuckle, though laughing heartily would likely have been painful. My physical and emotional state remained in turmoil, but seeing the children lifted my spirits. I was so engrossed in our conversation that I barely noticed Melissa standing nearby. Emma's tear-stained face brightened, and the other 2 were beaming with joy. Melissa's expression as she observed our interaction was a mixture of confusion and discomfort. I deliberately avoided discussing my injury, instead steering the conversation toward their recent school activities. Melissa tried to interject with questions and comments, but I intentionally disregarded her and avoided eye contact. After about 15 minutes of animated conversation, I noticed Nancy whisper something to Melissa. Shortly thereafter, Melissa announced that it was time for the children to leave, as I was still in pain and needed to recover. She instructed them to say goodbye and promised they could visit again the following day. As they bid farewell, the children covered my hands with kisses. Emma appeared to be in better spirits than when she had arrived, and Jerry seemed fine, but when Whitney looked at me from across the room, there were tears in her eyes. She quickly turned away, trying to conceal her emotions. When the children left, Melissa told them to wait in the elevator lobby while she remained for a few minutes to speak with me. As she approached, I hadn't fully prepared my reaction and couldn't deviate from the scenario I had already envisioned, so I simply closed my eyes and listened. "Nathan, I'm sorry you had to see me like that. I never wanted you to know. I'm not the wife you deserve," she said, her voice filled with remorse and sadness. I hope we can talk about this when you feel better." When I didn't respond, she added, "Maybe tomorrow you'll be in the mood for a conversation. If you want to talk, just call me." Her final words suggested she had no intention of visiting me in the hospital again. It became evident that I would need to contact her to initiate any further discussion, otherwise, she wouldn't return. Dr. Patel came back about 20 minutes after Melissa left. After another examination, she remarked, "You don't seem particularly upset after talking with your wife." I corrected her. "I haven't spoken with my wife," I replied flatly. Despite the profound sadness over my shattered life, I resolved to channel these emotions into productive activity. I assured Nancy that I wouldn't be sick again. She smiled at my comment and asked the doctor how long I needed to remain hospitalized. Dr. Patel advised that I stay another night, with the possibility of discharge the following day if the examination proved satisfactory. However, I was instructed to avoid exertion for at least a week and to refrain from returning to work for several days. "The doctor's orders are non-negotiable," she stated with as much authority as a person of small stature could muster. "I promise," I grinned, then reached for her hand. "That is, I promise if you don't tell my wife that you'll discharge me Friday morning. Of course, I can't ask you to lie to her, but if she happens to inquire, could you imply that I'll have to stay until Saturday?" "I think I can manage that," Dr. Patel laughed. "Unless I have to directly lie in response to a specific question, I'll inform Nurse Nancy of the same." After finishing a hearty dinner, I contacted my parents, with whom Melissa had little communication for reasons that now seemed obvious. Then I called my assistant at work and asked him to bring a notebook and pen. Though I wasn't in any condition to begin planning that evening, I wanted to be prepared to start the next morning. As anticipated, Melissa arrived with the children around 3:50 p.m. on Thursday. As expected, she hadn't bothered to visit me the previous day, and I had no intention of reaching out to her either, though Nancy mentioned that she had called the medical center once to check on my condition. By the time the children arrived on Thursday, I was feeling considerably better, not only due to my physical recovery, but also because I had had a productive day. Several colleagues from the office had visited me, as had my attorney Sarah, who had helped draft our prenuptial agreement. My parents even stopped by for lunch. Though none of this related to my work on biometric authentication systems, it was all about planning my future beyond the workplace. After spending half an hour with the children, Nancy appeared, as I had requested earlier, and insisted that I needed rest. Melissa approached me as she had the previous day, but this time I didn't close my eyes while she spoke. "Honey, you didn't reach out today to discuss our situation," she said softly. "It seems I'm not worth checking on unless I initiate contact." I replied with a note of sarcasm, trying to downplay my bitterness but probably failing. "My love," she whispered gently, "I didn't want to disturb you if you weren't in the mood to talk." "I'll probably be busy this weekend, my love," I replied sarcastically. "Nathan, I am so sorry. I really hope that after this, we can move forward," she murmured. Then she took my hand and kissed it, but I remained expressionless. As she left, she said goodbye quietly, giving a slight wave. I couldn't help but notice that she never once expressed love for me or mentioned ending her affair with Daniel Reed. I detected only a hint of genuine regret at being caught. The remaining aspects of my plan, which still needed completion, were now easy to implement. Shortly before visiting hours ended, Melissa's parents came to see me. I was surprised until they delicately explained the reason for their visit. Melissa apparently didn't want to threaten me with losing custody of the children in the event of our divorce, so her parents were doing it instead. "Melissa has admitted her mistake," her mother said, taking my hand. "Really?" I asked sarcastically. After a long pause, her mother replied, "You know that very well. That's what caused your accident. I just hope you find the strength to forgive her, Nathan. You are such a good father and a loving person, and I know it would destroy you not to be around your children every day." "You're right about that, of course, Barbara," I said grimly. The gloominess was merely a pretense. The most crucial element of my plan was to secure sole custody of the children. After a brief exchange of pleasantries during which Melissa's parents delivered the message they had clearly been instructed to convey, they departed. Any uncertainty about my future actions vanished that on Friday morning, Dr. Patel performed another examination, after which she approved my discharge. "Remember that you shouldn't exert yourself for at least a week," she advised. "Scout's honor," I replied, attempting the Boy Scout salute. Not having been a Boy Scout, I wasn't certain how accurate my gesture was, but at least I made Dr. Patel laugh. After thanking Nancy and attempting to give her a $500 tip, which she had to refuse, I gave her a gentle hug and left with my assistant Marcus before 10 a.m. Dealing with Daniel Reed was straightforward. I could have simply had him fired, but that wasn't sufficient. My goal was to thoroughly ruin his career. Simply finding another position in a similar field with comparable compensation would be an inadequate consequence. I wanted to ensure he lost his security clearance and would be unable to secure employment with equivalent salary and status. Following the advice of Sarah and her recommended divorce specialist, and having access to Daniel's banking information and direct deposits, I decided to meet with Ruby. Why her? My assistant drove me to Ruby's fitness studio, but I asked him to wait in the car. Although Marcus was aware of all my plans, I felt obligated to speak with Ruby privately. Despite calling ahead, Ruby seemed surprised and pleased to see me. "Hi, Ruby." I smiled as she approached with her striking figure. "I have a concussion, so I can't hug you as tightly as I'd like. Perhaps we'll just kiss each other's hands." "Oh, you scoundrel," she teased, giggling. "You probably got a concussion just so I couldn't hug you." We exchanged hand kisses, a rather unsatisfactory greeting. Ruby looked amazing, dressed fashionably and professionally, yet radiating that timeless vitality that seemed untouched by the years. "Come into my office," she insisted, squeezing my hand firmly. After expressing my delight at our reunion, I quickly addressed the reason for my visit. "I need your help, Ruby," I confessed, feeling sadness rise within me. "Anything, Nathan," she replied, gently taking my hand. "I'm ready to help you in any way I can. You made my dream come true." "I totally agree, as long as there's no harm involved." Her words, accompanied by a warm smile, brought me more joy than I could have imagined. "You've got it," I replied with a laugh that I shared all the details of my situation that had led me to seek her assistance, including my emotional reaction and why I needed her support. I emphasized the importance of my children by proudly showing her their photos. When I mentioned that my second child was named Whitney, she suddenly paused. "Did you name her Whitney?" She sighed in disbelief. I understood her thoughts perfectly and, despite the current circumstances, saw no harm in embellishing the truth slightly. "Yes, she was named after my beloved from before the wedding," I said with a grin. This triggered an emotional response, and tears welled up in her eyes. "You scoundrel. I've cried for you only twice in the last decade." I chuckled, gently taking her hand. "Tears of happiness are a wonderful thing. How can I help you shed some now?" Wiping away her tears, I made a request that took her by surprise. I asked if she would use her fitness platform and network to create a compromising situation for my wife and send payment for exclusive content to her bank account. When the initial shock subsided, we discussed the situation in detail. She offered several excellent suggestions and one particularly brilliant idea. "You have to ensure this can never be traced back to you and that no one discovers our previous relationship," she advised. "Relationship? Is that what you call it?" I joked. "Oh, hush," she laughed. "Now it's my turn to teach you something. I know someone who can help with this through a paid subscription service even more popular than mine. No questions asked. Just transfer the funds to him, and he'll then deposit them into your wife's account. I'll contact him immediately." In a brief 4-minute phone conversation with Ruby's associate, everything was arranged. She informed me of the required content format and assured me that all the money I provided would be transferred to her friend and an equal amount to Melissa's account. Additionally, my friend will need your wife's signature on a release form. Can you obtain that or convincingly reproduce it? "I can manage that," I stated confidently. "I'll send it to you today," she suggested. "Wait until tomorrow. I'll create a new email account at the library specifically for this purpose and will contact you as soon as it's ready." As I left Ruby's office, I grinned, feeling inspired. Before departing, I risked a gentle kiss on her lips. Fortunately, Melissa had insisted on having credit cards issued exclusively in her name shortly after our wedding. I hadn't paid much attention to them previously, but now I was determined to locate the bank accounts in her name only. I knew I would easily find these account numbers among the documents scattered throughout our house. With Daniel and Melissa's bank account numbers, Melissa's credit card information, my own funds for financing, and Ruby's assistance, I had everything necessary for my plan. Additionally, my loyal assistant Marcus was always ready to support me, and I knew I could rely on him in any situation. It's impossible not to acknowledge Marcus's unwavering loyalty and dedication. He's not merely my secretary, but my reliable assistant. Among all my employees, he's the highest paid after only the CEO and CFO of my companies. With an engineering degree, he excels at data analysis and implementing technical improvements in my ambitious projects. Despite his impressive qualifications, he's always prepared to go above and beyond to support me. This was evident when he collected me from the hospital and waited for me at Ruby's studio. Furthermore, he was an outstanding Division I football player in college, playing middle linebacker in his senior year. Standing 6 feet 2 inches and weighing almost 245 pounds of muscle, finding jackets that fit him without tearing at the sleeves is no simple task. Despite the potential risks involved in my plan, I strategized carefully and maintained optimism. After Marcus dropped me off at home, I didn't check whether Melissa was present. Instead, I had a light meal before calling her cell phone. Hello, dear. I see you called, she purred, noticing my number on the caller ID. No need. I replied coldly, deliberately removing any warmth from my tone. I'm leaving early and taking the kids for milkshakes. We'll be home around 5:30 p.m. Oh, I should prepare a nice dinner for you when you return, she purred, attempting to sound cheerful. Don't spoil the kids' dinner, I responded. Thanks for the parenting tips, I added sarcastically. See you at 5:30. The children were delighted to see me and eagerly inquired about my well-being, excitedly sharing their recent activities. Their faces brightened even more when I mentioned we would visit their favorite cafe for milkshakes. While we all enjoyed our treats, I decided to sit down with them and explain that there would be some changes in the future, assuring them it wasn't their fault. Although I tried to maintain a calm and direct tone, Emma saw through my facade. I understand what you're implying, she hinted. If you and Mom get divorced, I want to live with you, she stated firmly. Whitney, shocked, asked, Are you getting divorced? I answered quickly, Let's not assume the worst for now. I calmed them both, especially Whitney, who appeared worried. Your mom and I are experiencing some difficulties right now, and I'm not certain how everything will unfold. But I want you to always remember that Mom and I love you more than anything in the world. You three beautiful children are not the cause of our problems. Emma surprised me once again. You love us with all your heart, don't you, Dad? And Mom loves us, Jerry added. Emma answered quickly, Don't be too sure, kid. Wanting to defuse the tension, I gently placed my hand on Emma's arm. Dear, I believe Mom deeply loves all of you. Sometimes it's just difficult for her to express it. Let's not judge her, okay? Let's hope for the best. Whitney sighed softly, but Jerry and Emma seemed to set aside their doubts. Jerry, with all the sincerity of an 8-year-old, asked if I would attend his Little League game at noon the following day. I couldn't help but smile. I wouldn't miss it for anything, son. Turning to my daughters, I asked cheerfully, Girls, what do you have planned for Saturday? Unfortunately, I had missed my regular Thursday technology conference call due to my hospitalization, but by the time we returned home around 5:20 p.m., all three children were in good spirits. I ensured that at least one child remained between Melissa and me during her greeting, as I still feared any physical contact with her. Later that evening, when the children went to bed, I retired to the guest room. Don't you want to talk? Melissa asked, concerned. I have a splitting headache from the concussion. I just need to take pain medication and get some sleep, I explained. I quickly swallowed 2 Tylenol tablets, passing them off as prescription painkillers, and closed the door to rest. I'm available to talk whenever you're ready, Melissa said, closing the guest room door behind her. Avoiding meaningful conversations or intimacy with Melissa over the weekend proved surprisingly easy. I began implementing my plan without complications. The initial tasks were straightforward. I used Melissa's credit card to order 2 small high-definition security cameras and motion sensors for expedited delivery to our house on Monday. I printed the release form that Ruby had sent me and then promptly deleted it. I also printed new benefit and health insurance forms from my company's database, placing the release form penultimate in the stack and noting where Melissa should sign. Knowing that Melissa would be accommodating over the weekend, but not indefinitely, I handed her the documents on Sunday, explaining they were for medical insurance, disability registration, and other administrative purposes. I've updated the life insurance forms for work, making you and the children co-beneficiaries, I explained, leaving the documents with her. I knew she wouldn't read them thoroughly, but would merely skim the first few pages. When she noticed her name on the beneficiary list, she smiled, reassured that I wasn't planning to leave her. She brought me the signed documents, interrupting my card game with Whitney and Jerry. Darling, she purred, handing me the papers. I casually placed them in my briefcase and continued playing cards. I also contacted the CEO of the company where Daniel Reed worked and requested security verification for 5 employees in his department. Due to the sensitive nature of our work, just as some companies conduct random drug testing, employees might not realize that their employer, rather than the government, initiates such processes. On Monday morning, after the children left for school, Melissa felt compelled to address the situation. "We can't avoid discussing what happened," she said firmly, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. I resisted the urge to question our relationship and instead confessed, "Melissa, I'm still trying to process everything. I haven't fully comprehended what I witnessed. I need to clear my mind before we can have a meaningful conversation. I won't act impulsively." "All right, dear," she replied, sounding satisfied though not entirely content. "I hope you feel better soon. I want to show you how much I care about you. The children and I miss you." I forced a smile and answered, "I miss them too. I have a social committee meeting at the country club in half an hour, but I'll be back by 2 o'clock to pick up the kids." "Can you manage without me?" she asked. I wanted to say, "I'll find out soon enough," but restrained myself. "Have a good time." "I'll be fine," I replied. She was making this too easy. About 30 minutes after she left, a courier delivered the cameras. I called Marcus, and together we quickly, in less than an hour, installed cameras, switches, and motion sensors in the master bedroom. To avoid leaving fingerprints or DNA, we handled all equipment wearing latex gloves. The next task was to send a signal to Melissa's computer. If I was proficient with computers, Marcus was an expert. All we needed was to discover her password, and then in just 10 minutes, connect the cameras to her computer. After installing an effective password cracking program on my laptop, I connected my device and began the process. Marcus, still wearing his latex gloves, outlined our plan as we initiated the program. He had just started suggesting what we could do while waiting when the program emitted a beep. Curious, I asked if something had gone wrong. Marcus assured me this wasn't the case and, grinning, informed me that the password had already been cracked. Surprised, I asked how this was possible. Marcus explained that the program first tests 1,000 of the most common passwords before progressing to more complex algorithms. Laughing, he revealed that Melissa's password was Princess, the 28th most common password according to the program. I couldn't help but laugh at such predictability. She had always ignored my advice about technology, so why would she heed my suggestions about using random characters for passwords? True to his word, 10 minutes later, the camera footage was being recorded to a file on Melissa's computer. After another 5 minutes, I could access this file remotely from my office and control the cameras and motion sensors. On Tuesday, feeling better, I went to work. Before leaving, I activated the cameras and motion sensors, ensuring the security of our home. I arranged for the transfer of $10,000 from a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands to Daniel Reed's bank account. Feeling emotionally stable and physically recovered from the concussion, I was able to focus on work. In the evening, after putting the children to bed, Melissa asked me to join her in bed, noting my improved condition. I refused. For a week, I allowed myself to imagine a scenario in which Melissa realized her mistake, rekindled her love for me, and ended her relationship with Daniel. But I didn't lower my guard, knowing these thoughts were mere fantasies. This was confirmed when I watched Thursday's video footage and saw my wife in a state of bliss with Daniel. I could only bear to watch for a few minutes. Despite the satisfaction of knowing this video could help me secure sole custody of my children, I was overwhelmed by a wave of sadness. On Friday morning, I uploaded Melissa's compromising video to a subscription-based fitness platform through Ruby, offering her $5,000 to post it. By Friday evening, the money had been transferred to Melissa's account, and the video became available to paying subscribers. Unfortunately, Daniel's face had to be digitally altered due to the lack of a formal release, but I found some consolation in the fact that the video was posted in a section called Fitness Trainers Private Sessions. Over the next 2 weeks, 2 more videos were uploaded, resulting in 2 additional $5,000 transfers to Melissa's account. Another $10,000 was transferred to Daniel's account from the Cayman Islands Corporation. I realized it was time to address the situation before Melissa and Daniel received their month-end bank statements and became confused. Convincingly pretending to be emotional, Melissa asked me for intimacy, and I told her in a trembling voice that I wasn't ready yet. To my surprise, she was understanding, saying she would wait until I felt comfortable. The day after the third video reached subscribers, a security audit was conducted on Daniel. I'm not certain exactly how, but someone obtained an unedited version of the video showing Daniel with Melissa, as well as an extract from his bank account statements. Daniel was the third person questioned that day, and it was evident he didn't grasp the significance of his interview. Knowing the CEO would receive a report on the polygraph results, I managed to obtain a transcript of Daniel's interview by day's end. During the interview, Daniel was asked if he engaged in any activities outside of work that could potentially lead to blackmail. Initially, he denied this, but the polygraph indicated deception. The examiner then showed Daniel the video and inquired about his relationship with the woman. Daniel's face paled as he weighed the consequences of lying versus telling the truth. Ultimately, he chose honesty. "Isn't that Melissa Chun, who's married to your colleague Nathan Chun?" the interrogator asked. Daniel stammered, explaining that Nathan Chun worked for an affiliated company in the same building. "It's a large complex," he managed to say. "Have you ever considered that an affair with a married colleague's wife could lead to blackmail?" Daniel was stunned. "I never thought about it," he admitted. Daniel was questioned about payments from foreign organizations since his last security clearance review. "Absolutely none," he stated. But when asked specifically about contributions from corporations based in the Cayman Islands, he appeared confused. "I don't know anything about that." "It must be some mistake," he stammered nervously. The examiner expressed concern about the mistake made by two Cayman Islands companies whose affiliations remained unknown. "Someone must be trying to set me up," Daniel complained, clearly distressed. The examiner then sarcastically asked if the video featuring Daniel and Mrs. Chun was also fabricated. Despite attempting to remain impartial, the examiner concluded the interview after a few more questions. Daniel sat silently while the technician removed the polygraph sensors. The examiner then sternly warned him to avoid contact with anyone connected to classified information. Neither Mr. and Mrs. Chun nor the two corporations that had deposited money into his account. Daniel was informed that disobedience would result in prosecution. Despite the gravity of the situation, after reviewing Daniel's interview, I felt satisfied. After ensuring the children were asleep, Melissa and I went to bed. As we lay side by side, I knew this would be our last intimate moment. I couldn't help but admire Melissa's ability to maintain her composure. Smiling sardonically, I told her I could never be intimate with her again given her possible affairs, including with Daniel. The shock on her face was priceless. She stuttered and blushed, demanding to know what I meant. The next morning, I was helping the children prepare for school under Melissa's icy glare. As soon as they left, I made a quick phone call, and moments later, the doorbell rang. "It's for you," I joked. Melissa flushed with anger and rushed to the door. "How dare you speak to me like that? You jerk," she muttered. "It won't be long now," I replied with a laugh. When Melissa opened the door, the process server handed her divorce papers. "Melissa Chun, you've been served," he announced. Along with the divorce documents were incriminating screenshots from the subscription website and access credentials. "Did you think I wouldn't discover your dirty little secrets, you deceiver?" I taunted as Melissa stood at the kitchen table in disbelief. "Have you seen yourself on this site? Here's your reality check," I shouted, pointing to a paper with the website address and password. I was shocked when my assistant pointed this out to me. "It's bad enough that you disrespected me by sleeping with that jerk in our bed, but then you had to publicize it and profit from it. I don't understand what's happening," she said as tears welled in her eyes. "I'm taking the kids for the weekend," I announced, standing up. "Don't forget to hire the best lawyer you can find. Your income from professional fitness videos will surely come in handy because you'll need it." That same day, Daniel was terminated and escorted from the building. His security clearance was revoked. Just as I was about to leave to collect the children for the weekend, my administrative assistant called through the intercom. "Nathan, security reports that Daniel Reed is intoxicated in the parking lot, shouting your name. Should I call the police?" I couldn't help but laugh. "No, Tracy. Ask Marcus to come here immediately." The situation seemed too perfect. When Marcus arrived, we went to a window overlooking the area where Daniel was causing a scene. Coincidentally, This was one of the best monitored locations in terms of security cameras. Daniel was staggering back and forth, visibly drunk. Without hesitation, Marcus slipped out through a side door and positioned himself near the building, out of sight. I confidently walked out the main entrance, drawing Daniel's attention. He immediately began hurling insults, accusing me of getting him fired and ruining his security clearance. When he lunged at me, I quickly moved toward where Marcus was waiting. I allowed Daniel to get close enough to swing at me, knowing our plan was about to come to fruition. Though I received only a glancing blow to my shoulder, I collapsed dramatically, as if I'd sustained a devastating hit. As Daniel loomed over me, preparing to strike again, Marcus suddenly appeared in front of the security camera. He swiftly grabbed Daniel and delivered a powerful forearm strike to his jaw, reminiscent of a football tackle. Daniel flew backward and lost consciousness. Marcus came to my aid, helping me to my feet while I feigned dizziness by leaning against a nearby car. Without hesitation, Marcus called emergency services. All this occurred under the watchful eye of surveillance cameras. The police arrived 3 minutes later, promptly handcuffed Daniel to a stretcher, and transported him by ambulance to the hospital. I filed assault charges. After that, I collected the children and took them to a scenic mountain resort for the weekend. At the end of our trip, I broke the news to the children that Melissa and I were getting divorced. Emma appeared pleased, while the other two were surprisingly calm, reassured by my promise to continue loving them unconditionally. When we returned Sunday evening, Melissa's reaction wasn't as negative as I had anticipated. Expecting a potential confrontation, I had taken precautions. I had moved valuables and most of my clothing to a secure, climate-controlled storage facility. Despite this, I had no intention of leaving our home. After the children shared details about our pleasant weekend, Melissa and I began talking. Her first words addressed my involvement in organizing the videos, though she couldn't comprehend how I had managed it. Despite being surprised by her controlled tone, I neither apologized nor admitted guilt. Instead, I simply asked her to stop accusing me of something I clearly didn't do, responding with a touch of indignation. I was wary that she might be recording our conversation. "I've been busy this weekend, Nathan," she explained. "I hired an attorney and a computer forensics expert. I still can't figure out how you managed to cover your tracks so thoroughly. This isn't going to be simple for me to handle." "I understand your concerns, Melissa. I hope we can negotiate custody arrangements," I said. "Melissa, we can resolve this issue. I suggest you grant me sole custody of the children and the house so they maintain stability. In return, I'll provide you with extensive visitation rights. I'll even purchase a new home for you so that you and Daniel can enjoy it. Did you hear he lost not only his job, but his entire career? I don't want to live with Daniel anymore." "It's not that," she began, but I quickly interrupted her. "I don't want to hear it, Melissa." I composed myself and continued. "You're free to be with whomever you choose. I don't care. I'm merely offering an option." After a moment of silence and a few tears, she said, "I understand you might think I'm a bad mother, but I'm not. I love our children more than anything, and I can't accept the thought of being separated from them. None of us benefits from a court battle. I know you'll try to ruin my reputation, and I won't survive that. Neither of us wants the children to learn all the details or see those videos. I agree it's better to keep the children uninformed. What do you suggest we do?" I asked, genuinely curious. "My attorney recommends that we both agree to use a mediator, preferably a former family court judge. I'm willing to consider sole or joint custody, and you can do the same. We'll allow the mediator to assess the situation, consider the children's preferences, and abide by their decision. If we keep the case confidential, we can reach a resolution more quickly," she replied. I was pleasantly surprised by her discretion. She seemed to have recognized my determination, perhaps through conversations with Daniel. "Let's schedule a meeting with our attorneys next week to discuss and finalize the details," I suggested. "I have one condition. I will not agree to joint custody. It's too complicated for the children. I'm seeking sole custody, but I'll accept the mediator's decision if that's their recommendation." I allowed Melissa to continue occupying the master bedroom while I slept in the guest room. I didn't reveal my reason for this arrangement to avoid causing additional stress, but now that everything was in the open, I refused to sleep in the room where Daniel had been with her. During our joint meeting with the attorneys on Tuesday, we both instructed them to simply handle our legal requirements without engaging in negotiations. We agreed to divide all marital property equally, with certain exceptions based on the prenuptial agreement. This agreement excluded 90% of our assets and also stipulated an intermediary, a former family court judge with an excellent reputation. The contract also detailed the schedule for mediator hearings and the deadline for a decision, the amount of child support and alimony I would pay in case of sole or joint custody granted to Melissa, and the duration of alimony payments. She objected to the restrictions on communicating with Daniel in the children's presence, but since she claimed she no longer wished to see him, she reluctantly agreed to comply. Additionally, she agreed not to discuss the situation with the children in an attempt to influence their testimony to the mediator. The agreement also specified how much Melissa could spend from my funds on new housing, whether a house, condominium, or apartment, in the event I received sole custody and she had to vacate our current home. We spent the entire day discussing the specific arrangements required in the case of joint custody or if one of us received sole custody of the children. It was a lengthy process, but we managed to reach an agreement. The potential mediator we contacted agreed to handle the case, and we discussed compensation, which would be equally divided from our joint property not covered by the prenuptial agreement. We also established a briefing date in 2 weeks and a hearing date 4 weeks later. I didn't feel obligated to formally include these details in the contract. After discussing face-to-face, we agreed that third parties would not be permitted in our shared home and that the person who would have to leave would do so within 2 weeks after the custody agreement was finalized. Additionally, I promised that my attorney would contact the subscription site to remove her videos and issue refunds. Fortunately, one call from Ruby was sufficient to resolve this matter. I never attempted to influence the children's opinions, and as far as I know, neither did Melissa. We never exchanged unkind or sarcastic remarks, even in private. The only questionable behavior she exhibited was walking around the house insufficiently dressed when the children were asleep or absent. I understood her motives, but out of frustration, I once questioned her about it. On the day of the hearing, I was anxious despite believing I had an advantage. I was hoping for sole custody, so the possibility of joint custody was the worst outcome I could imagine. As the hearing approached, my anxiety increased. The process seemed to be proceeding well until the judge made several remarks that concerned me. It appeared he was leaning toward joint custody. Shortly before the children were scheduled to be interviewed, he surprised us by offering to let us watch the interviews on closed-circuit television. The mediator's request caught me off guard, and I couldn't agree to it. I apologize for not mentioning this earlier, but it would undermine the necessary candor and trust if one of you objects to me meeting with each child privately. If you cannot agree, I will have to refund your payment and recommend another mediator. The interviews with the children were scheduled for tomorrow anyway, on their day off from school. Please let me know your decision. I was almost inclined to object and hope we could find another mediator less predisposed to joint custody. My attorney urged me not to do this, citing Emma's hostility toward Melissa and the fact that this mediator considered children's preferences. Since Emma was approaching an age where she could make her own decisions, the judge was likely to give her opinion more weight than any other mediator would. Before leaving home, Melissa and I met with our attorneys and agreed to the mediator's terms. We also agreed not to question the children later about what they had said. That evening at dinner, Melissa made several comments that I interpreted as expressing her desire for joint custody. I simply gave her a stern look without responding. Emma caught my eye and smiled slightly. The next day, the mediator met with each child individually. The conversation with Jerry lasted about 20 minutes, with Whitney about 30 minutes, and with Emma more than an hour. When Emma emerged, after ensuring Melissa and her attorney weren't looking, she gave me a thumbs up. As agreed, Melissa's parents took the children out for a meal after the interviews, instructing them to return home around 4 p.m. After we stopped for lunch, The mediator was prepared to render a decision. We hadn't expected this. According to our agreement, he had another week to resolve the issue, so there was no pressure. He didn't even want to hear the 30-minute closing arguments our attorneys had prepared. After carefully reviewing all the evidence and prioritizing the children's welfare, I have decided to grant sole custody of all 3 children to their father, Nathan Chun. Furthermore, I believe the existing agreement accepted by both parties is fair and in the children's best interests. Therefore, the case will be resolved under the terms outlined in the contract. On Monday, you will receive a certified copy of this decision to submit to the family court along with the settlement agreement. Thank you for entrusting this case to me, and I wish you all the best moving forward. Melissa and I both shed tears for different reasons. The atmosphere during the drive home was heavy and somber. I didn't feel anger, and she appeared depressed. That familiar sense of sadness returned when our family's dissolution became official, even though it was necessary and ultimately peaceful for me. That evening, when we shared the news with the children, Melissa was distant, so I led most of the conversation. I embraced Melissa warmly, and Emma hugged her as well. I spoke positively about Melissa and explained the visitation schedule. A week after the hearing, I purchased a new house for Melissa, and she relocated within the agreed-upon 2-week period, with assistance from our children, her parents, and her brother. We helped with the move and also hired a moving company to transport larger items, such as the bed from the master bedroom. Several months later, when the divorce was finalized, I hosted a gathering at my home to express gratitude to everyone who had supported me, especially close friends and family. I kept the purpose of the celebration a secret from the children, simply calling it a community gathering, but my 13-year-old daughter Emma deduced the truth herself. Shortly before the guests arrived, Emma entered my room, closed the door, then made me sit down and sat on my lap, asking a difficult question. When I inquired why she was doing this, she smiled broadly and told me about her conversation with the mediator. I told him I saw Mom and another man being overly affectionate at her house, and it affected me negatively. She said that I was surprised and asked if she had actually witnessed such behavior. Emma replied, "It doesn't matter because Mom was unfaithful, and I wouldn't want to live with her if she got custody." Realizing it was in Jerry and Whitney's best interest to remain with us, she shared this news with a big smile, then kissed me on the cheek and quickly left. I decided not to pursue this issue, but focused on celebrating our new beginning and reconnecting with Ruby. Ruby looked stunning at the gathering and quickly established rapport with Jerry and Whitney. She spent considerable time playing baseball with Jerry and became close to both children. She succeeded in this area much more effectively than I had. When Ruby was speaking privately with Whitney, I don't know what they discussed, but they appeared to enjoy each other's company, laughing and chatting for quite some time. Emma was somewhat shy around Ruby compared to the other children, but she seemed to make a favorable impression while they discussed fashion. In the middle of the celebration, Ruby pulled me aside into a quiet corner, hugged me, and whispered, "Let your parents look after the children today, and you can come home with me. I promise you'll return safely tomorrow at 10 a.m., but I can't guarantee you'll be fully alert." Without waiting for a response, she gave me a seductive kiss and hurried away. That night, Ruby rekindled desires I had long suppressed. When I was leaving, I confessed to her, "I don't know what you see in me, but I enjoy being with you. Could there be a genuine connection between us?" "I see you as a kind, generous, and intelligent person," she replied. "How about taking me to that resort for 3 days starting on the 14th, so we can determine if we both want a serious relationship? To be honest, I'm tired of casual encounters. I need a man who belongs exclusively to me." After kissing me, she closed the door, encouraging me to return to my wonderful children. 2 years after this pivotal event, my life has undergone significant changes. All 3 children perform well academically, participate in social activities, and play sports. They are well-adjusted and happy. Melissa fulfills her visitation responsibilities and maintains a positive relationship with the children. Emma has also improved her relationship with Melissa and even spent last summer at her parents' lake house with her siblings without any issues. Meanwhile, my business continues to thrive, bringing unprecedented financial success. Information about my involvement in certain transactions surfaced accidentally when a report intended for government officials was mistakenly sent to employees who shouldn't have seen it. Despite this, others' attitudes toward me remain unchanged. Daniel Reed left town shortly after our celebration, and according to the only employee who still maintains contact with him, he secured a position as a retail electronic salesperson on the West Coast, working for a company that doesn't handle sensitive technologies. The children have fully accepted Ruby as a friend, not a mother, and greatly enjoy her company. 2 years later, Ruby decided we should be exclusive. She recently sold her fitness platform and moved in with me and the children. Although marriage isn't under consideration, she devotes herself entirely to me and assumes maternal responsibilities toward the children while simultaneously operating a small business selling specialized athletic apparel online.